This video is about the first lesson I have learned throughout the EdTech program, reflections on learning. What I mean by learning is not just all of the things that I have learned during the program, but specifically what I have learned about learning. I learned that it is important for an instructor to curate resources because learners do not learn well when they are asked to discover resources for themselves. I created an RSS activity in EdTech 501. This lesson plan explains how a teacher can use an RSS feed to curate news sources for students. I had always wanted to include a current events component in my class, but when I let the students loose on the internet, they came back with things that did not fit my idea of a current event. I tried setting guidelines, such as how long articles needed to be and what sources were and were not appropriate, but I found myself burdening my students. The learners spent more time figuring out if an article could be used, rather than reading and summarizing the article, which was the point of the activity. I created this page to pull news articles from a select group of sources for my students. Because this was created for middle school students, I carefully selected news sources that write articles that are appropriate for a middle school reading level. In this way, I could allow my students to exercise a lot of choice in the activity, while still providing enough guidance to make sure their options were acceptable. I also learned that learners can only process so much information at a time. I learned that multimedia should be designed so that learners experience a minimal amount of written words. I created an interactive PowerPoint that has minimal words on the screen and allows learners to click for more information rather than requiring them to read all of the information that's on screen. It also includes an embedded video that provides narration. Learners are not bombarded with words on the screen during the narration. This allows them to focus their verbal processing channel on what they are hearing without requiring them to do extra reading. I learned that it is important for words to be embedded in graphics. I created an interactive map so that learners can consider the geographic context for the videos they were watching. In EdTech 502, I created a clickable graphic to provide geographic content for information students were learning about different countries. What I learned about learning as it relates to educational technology is that designers and instructors should always be aware of what the science of instruction tells us about how learners learn. They should use that awareness to inform the way they design and select resources so that learners will actually learn from learning activities. To demonstrate the development of my understanding of the art and science of teaching, I want to show you 3 projects that I made in 3 different classes. The first is my portfolio web quest. It was designed to show students how to create a blog and post work they had done on that blog. The goal of this project was to give students an opportunity to publish their work for a broader audience. This was created in my first year of the program, and I had already seen that it was significant for students to have opportunities to reflect on their work and share it with others. The second example is my digital citizenship project-based learning unit. In designing this unit, I expanded on the idea of an authentic audience, asking students to recruit an audience and gather data from that audience. This project required students to use Google Forms to analyze data. It required them to work in groups to prepare a project, and it required them to write reports about the process. Using a learning management system to guide students through the process, I was able to allow them to work at a flexible pace throughout the project. I learned that I could allow students to move through the process at their own pace as I stepped into the role of facilitator and encourager. Instead of badgering them to complete each step by a firm due date, I monitored them and redirected them when it seemed they were off task. The final example in this section is a unit I created to teach the students
about Scratch. I applied what I had learned about flexible pacing to this unit, using a learning management system to deliver content that students could access as they worked through the unit. I used checkpoints along the way to monitor student progress. And by the end of the unit, students were able to demonstrate the principles that I wanted them to learn. In this section, I would like to demonstrate what I learned about using data to inform the design and evaluation of instruction. When I was asked to evaluate learners in EdTech 503 instructional design, it seemed like a daunting task. However, I discovered that I could use Google Forms to collect and process a large volume of user data. I was able to collect data from a variety of learners and quickly identify the largest areas of need. I used Google Forms again to conduct an evaluation of Google Classroom. I was able to survey 100 students who had used the tool. I was also able to survey colleagues who had tested the tool. I was even able to use social media to conduct a survey of educators I had never met who used the tool. I was able to analyze all of this data from my survey report using the charts that were created by Google Forms. Before I discovered how easy it is to collect and use data in Google Forms, I thought that using any data other than test scores to form instruction was a nice idea, but not very realistic. Now I can survey groups of students often to analyze their perceptions and consider their opinions. In this section, I'm going to demonstrate how I applied what I learned about collaboration and networking in my practice. The first example is this forum I used to collect student work. Students submitted their work to the forum so that they could view each other's work and learn from each other. I frequently collected projects in this way, and my students came to appreciate the opportunity to show off their work and examine the work of others. The second example is this peer review section. I asked students to conduct peer reviews of other group projects before the projects were sent to an audience or submitted for grading. Students used a rubric and shared their ideas with each other.
This video is about the fifth lesson I have learned throughout the EdTech program, the research-practice connection. If educational technology is not carefully implemented according to valid pedagogies grounded in appropriate theories, then it does in fact drive the curriculum. The conversation must not be, hey, look, here's a technology that allows you to do this activity. The conversation should be, here's a good learning theory, here are some pedagogies that apply that theory, and here are some technologies that would support those pedagogical methods. Of course, that's not grounded in the marketing theory for ed tech companies, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to some stakeholders who aren't well versed in educational theory, but an educational technologist must be able to synthesize learning theories and educational technologies. Those who design instruction must be aware of research that has been done about the effectiveness of technology tools and their applications before they choose to use these tools. In EdTech 501, I did my first research assignment in the program, an annotated bibliography. This was the first time I used APA citation after teaching MLA citation for years, so I had to look up each citation carefully. I chose to focus on one-to-one technology initiatives because that is the model that my school has selected for technology integration. I appreciated the opportunity to read the research for myself and consider what best practice might truly look like. I wrote a paper in EdTech 504 to identify educational technologies that apply constructivist learning principles. In order to complete that paper, I had to consider several research studies. I was better prepared to follow APA citations, but this time all the articles had to be peer-reviewed. For the first time, I actually had to care about what journal an article was published in, beyond just making sure I had the right thing in italics in a citation. I realized that some journals seemed to appear in searches more than others, and I realized that some journals seemed to have more articles that were relevant to my efforts than others. I have been surprised by how often readings in a course module consist of research articles instead of textbooks. I have collected a large volume of research articles on my own computer from the various assignments I've done throughout the program. I've been surprised by how often I've referred back to them and developed a greater understanding of their significance in light of something I've read for a different course. The biggest influence that my exposure to research has had on my professional practice is the way I frame conversations about educational technology that I have with other professionals. I am more likely to connect ideas to learning theories and frame educational technology tools in the context of good pedagogical methods.